Slow down. Are you an android? Holy shit, you're an android. How did you even do that?
I took my brain out and put it into this body.
How?
How did I do that?
Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Taicho, and we're here with another One Piece review. Chapter 1113 dropped this weekend, and it definitely got me feeling like One Piece is coming to a close much quicker than anticipated. I thought this was a really awesome chapter. It felt really tense, and I'm going to break it up into 4 different parts for review purposes. So I'm going to touch on the cover story pretty briefly. From there, I'm going to touch on all the different world reactions and how their relationships or non-relationships with the Straw Hats or other primary characters in the story may have implications for their future actions. From there, I'm going to touch on the Gorosei. We've seen a lot of emotional angst, and I think this chapter does a great job of kind of depicting the direness of the situation and how their actions ultimately feel like it's almost the end of One Piece. And then lastly, I'll touch on Vegapunk and of course the message, as well as my thoughts on how the future of some of the Vegapunks will play out. So starting with the cover story, I really enjoyed the cover story. Chess is a fun game. I'm sure many of us have grown up playing it. I thought the pieces were almost perfectly represented by the different characters of the Straw Hats. Of course, you have Chopper representing the pawn, the weakest player and the weakest piece in chess, but also a very valuable piece nonetheless. From there, we have bishops represented by Usopp and Brook. Their ability is to move diagonally across the board in any amount of spaces. From there, we have the Rook represented by a castle piece. This is Jinbei and Franky. They can move any number of spaces vertically and horizontally. From there, we have the Knights, the 2 wings of the king, represented by Zoro and Sanji. I guess Oda has committed to kind of like this light blue theme as a contrast to Sanji's colorway, and Zoro, being the more edgy character, usually is represented by darker colors, so of course he has a black and yellow horse. I thought that horse looks sick. It looks like one of the apocalyptic horses. But second to last, we have Nami occupying the most powerful piece in chess, which is the queen. Can move any direction, any amount of spaces, pretty much a combination of the rook and the bishop in terms of how it is able to maneuver across the board, and potentially somewhat of a representation of Nami's future role to play. Will she become a queen? Does she have some queen blood in her? Who knows? But that's the piece that she has. And then lastly, we have the king, which is Sun God Nika. Arguably the second weakest piece in chess, but of course we know that's not the truth when it comes to Luffy. Moving on, I'm going to touch on the different factions that were shown in this chapter as we were inching closer and closer to the message to be delivered by Vegapunk. So we get 7 or 8 different factions, 4 of them having very strong associations to either Vegapunk himself or the Straw Hats. So we get K and Usopp's group, Usopp's former pirate crew. We have Laboon, Crocus, of course, name that all of the initial 5 Straw Hats, and then there's the relationship with Brook there as well. We go to Baltimore, which is Vegapunk's hometown. Franky, of course, was there, as mentioned in the chapter. Lastly, we have Birdie Kingdom, where Chopper trained during the time skip. So I think the relationships is pretty important, and given the message that Vegapunk delivers at the end of the chapter, if you notice, all of these factions outside of Baltimore explicitly, they have means to react to the biblical event that is going to happen in One Piece. So K, of course, has large amounts of funds and also has access to the port. Very important if you need to be able to travel on the sea. Of course, we know she gave the Mary to the crew, and so I think that'll play a future role later on. Laboon and Crocus. We've seen Crocus go inside of Laboon before, so a very easy escape route if you needed to be able to navigate throughout the sea. We have the Birdie Kingdom, which has different levels of elevation. I think that's important. So animals, usually when there's a storm or something, they are the first to sense it and they get the high ground. Exhibit A with the Birdie Kingdom. And then lastly, I have Baltimore. And I'm not exactly sure what their like specific defense or mitigation effort against the biblical event that's going to happen would be, but given that it is Vegapunk's hometown, I just can't help but feel like he might have done something to help prepare them. So the reason I note that is kind of important is I do ultimately think, if you are familiar with Noah's Ark, that some of those events will play out in a sense that there were a bunch of people that listened to Noah and prepared for the flood and helped and jumped on the ship, and then there was a bunch of people that didn't and ultimately got swept away. So I think in the world of One Piece, you're going to have a similar kind of bifurcation where you have people that believe, prepare, and act. This explains why we've been seeing so much of Iceberg in a lot of these different offpans. And then you'll also have factions that won't react, and they'll be part of the great cleansing that is to come. So that's my kind of reaction to all these different parties starting to react to the message that Vegapunk delivers. From there, let's talk about Vegapunk. So, of course, we get the message that the sea is rising, and I don't think this is what anyone predicted that he would say, but it makes so much sense. So he is a scientist, and his communication all his life is towards the advancement of science. So it only makes sense that what he communicates will be from a scientific perspective and not your kind of typical message to either rally the people or, spoil some crazy big reveal like Musama is real and the government, because that would just never go over. His findings is rooted in science, so that makes sense. It answers some questions, specifically. Now we know why the celestial dragons live on top of the red line. We know why Wano is prepared to handle rising sea levels. We understand now why we've been getting pans to Iceberg and such. And so, yeah, that message, while providing some answers, is definitely going to open up a lot of questions, like, is that how the ancient kingdom was gone? A lot of people thought they got evaporated, but were they just kind of taken away by the sea? But yeah, so rather than me trying to predict exactly what's going to happen and how the story is going to end, because I think there are a lot of other YouTubers that are better suited for that, I'm just going to kind of roll with this as it goes. But let me know what you guys think is to come from that message. And then while we're on the topic of the Vegapunks, I am super curious to see which Vegapunks actually make it out of Egghead. So I'm going to say there are 8 total Vegapunks, starting with the 6 satellites, the 1 Stella, and then the 8th being Punk Records. There's a lot of theories out there that there was another Vegapunk, blah, 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 blah. From a story perspective, I didn't think that actually made sense, because you already have 6. What is 1 additional Vegapunk in the lab going to do? But we get to see that it is Vegapunk's brain, which is pretty much the brain devil fruit still alive, interestingly enough. But that is what Punk Records essentially is, and that Vegapunk, that portion of Vegapunk will probably continue to live. Starting with the first satellite, Shaka, he's out of commission. The second satellite, Lilith, I do think will survive. She's pretty much almost guaranteed, unless she kind of goes off and does something crazy. She's already on the ship. Well, she's with the main crew. So she should be able to get out of there. And I also just think personality-wise, she probably has the most seamless fit given her evil persona. The third satellite, Edison, he's currently at, I think, 82% damage. I don't see him surviving. I think whatever next couple of actions he takes to help them get away or help the ship land safely, it's going to cause his HP to go, or he'll have to just end up staying behind. We have Pythagoras, out of commission already. He got stomped out, curb stomped real quick. And then from there we have Atlas. Atlas is still alive. I'm not sure how Atlas's role is going to play out. She's one of those characters that can or cannot. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. She's just 50-50 on Atlas. I can't tell. York, I do think will make it off the island, but it's not going to be to live the life that she's hoping for as a celestial dragon. She is definitely a valuable resource for the Gorosei, but I just don't see them taking her to Marijois to live a grand life. I see her almost being a slave, essentially, and there for scientific purposes only. Of course, we have Stella, who's deceased, and then we have Vegapunk, or Punk Records, the brain. And I think that'll probably stay because that's also a huge information resource for the Gorosei as well. Speaking of Gorosei, I think that's the perfect segue into the final part of this review. So, wow, the Gorosei's like actions and emotions, if it wasn't for them, I don't think the kind of countdown would feel as intense as it is. They are just... They came in, they're kind of cool, calm, collected, in the sense that they arrived and they all knew what they had to do, right? Ethan knew he had to go and salvage the Pacifista. Marcus Mars knew he had to go and try and find the transponder snail. Speaking of Marcus Mars, bro, I don't know how you could get duped like that. Like, you thought he would put... Vegapunk pulled, like, the easiest fast one. He put a nice, big, shiny toy or shiny object, being Punk Records, in his brain, and he put the decoy right in front of it. Yeah. And then the other three, of course, were fighting Luffy, but now Saturn is up. I don't even know what Saturn's, like, actions are, but he's just on a rampage. He's going after Nico Robin, and again, like, just kind of the facial expressions that we're getting, they just seem so tense, and because they're not sure what Vegapunk is going to say, which, by the way, I don't think Vegapunk is going to reveal that Mew himself exists. I think that might get cut off. I do think the full message won't be revealed. We'll get enough details to kind of really guide us into, like, how the final story actions might unfold, but I don't think we're going to get a lot of super specific facts, like in the sense of like name drops or Ancient Kingdom name drops, stuff like that. I thought we would, but it might not. Given the way that the message is going, I don't think we will. And also, let me know if you guys feel this way, but every time I read kind of like the message and Vegapunk talks about him or he, it almost feels like he is talking about Luffy and Nika. Obviously he's not, but the way that the events are playing out and the way that the newspaper has spun it, don't be surprised if some weird stuff happens there. But yeah, the Gorosei. And then of course I gotta touch on Sanji versus Ethan. This was pretty expected, I'm not gonna lie. A few chapters ago, Oda, he gave us the typical Oda map where he told us where each Straw Hat was and where they were headed. It's a great feat for Sanjay. I think he needed the W. He should be fine. You know, his exoskeleton should be able to bounce back from that bite. How they handle Ethan moving forward, the Giants are just like the perfect counter to the Gorosei, right? The Gorosei are all large, special ability kind of animals, not exactly combatants, and the Giants are just like suited perfectly to fight them off or provide support. So yeah, I don't be surprised if Zoro in the next chapter or two gets a feat against Saturn. Him and Jinbei are on their way up to the Sunny, so I think whatever Sanji does, Zoro's going to probably do a little bit more. You know, he's got to keep pace with Sanji in that regard. And then, of course, we have the giant robot that's probably going to be the X factor in enabling the Straw Hats to get away. When the Gorosei see that, it's over, because it's one thing to have Vegapunk start to talk about the Ancient Kingdom or events from the past, the Void Century and such or whatever, but when you have actual relics from that time period and they see this, I think they're going to tweak. Yeah, but essentially that's kind of my review. We're right at the message. A lot of questions coming from it, but all aboard the Noah's Express. And let me know how you guys thought about the chapter. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you like, subscribe, and comment. And hit the bell for notifications on more awesome anime analytics videos. But until then, Taicho out.